Channel 6 News team brought you the information you needed to know.
The family album was found. That's about all we've been able to find so far.
For continuing live team coverage of the crash of Flight 592.
I've seen a lot of airplane crashes, and I have never seen one like this before.
Count on NBC 6, where the news comes first.
What happened to ValuJet Flight 592? The black box now has been recovered from the dark waters of the Everglades. On NBC News In Depth, we'll examine the safety questions about the many startup discount airlines in America. On Health Watch tonight, you will not believe what science has learned about our ability to smell, what it means. And he's back. Now the British have him. OJ takes his case to Oxford and beyond.
From NBC News, this is NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw.
Good evening. As searchers wade through the muck of the Everglades, looking for any signs of the DC-9 that crashed there and the 109 people who died, aviation officials now have their best clue: the black box containing the flight recorder. The crash site is just west of Miami Airport. That's where the ValuJet pilot was desperately trying to get back to when the plane went down. You're looking live now at the crash site, a primordial ooze of swamp and alligators and sawtooth grass. We begin with NBC's Robert Hager on what we know so far.
The recovery of the first of the plane's 2 recorders, critical to this puzzling investigation, came late this afternoon. A searcher found it in several feet of water and mud. Now it'll be rushed to Washington for analysis. This on a day when searchers also continued the awful job of removing what human remains they can find. And on a day when the federal government began another inspection crackdown on troubled ValuJet airline. Dozens of inspectors will swarm over the company's maintenance bases and ride along in cockpits for the next month. It's the latest of many special inspections of this airline, which since this engine breakup in Atlanta last June, had already experienced 7 mishaps and was briefly barred completely from hauling military passengers because of safety concerns. And now, Saturday's ultimate tragedy. The craft took off from the Miami airport about an hour late, climbed out over Biscayne Bay, turning north along the coast and then inland toward the Everglades and its destination, Atlanta. It had been cleared to 16,000 feet when the crew suddenly called controllers and asked to return to Miami. The pilots didn't know it, but disaster was just 2 minutes away. As controllers asked if the plane had a problem, investigator Robert Francis picks up the story.
The aircraft on the air traffic control frequency mentioned that there was smoke in both the cockpit and the cabin of the aircraft.
We don't know details yet about the smoke. Was it dense? Was there any open flame? What was the source? What was it that had gone wrong? There may be clues on the cockpit voice recorder. That would record the conversation in the cockpit between the pilot and the co-pilot. Or if a flight attendant went forward, it would have that as well. It is clear that whatever had happened got worse in a hurry. The problem may have been electrical. There are dozens of circuits wired into the back wall of the cockpit. It may be that oxygen masks dropped at the passengers' seats. Up front, if the crew had time, they could have grabbed for the mask and goggles most DC-9s have in the cockpit. What investigators have been able to review is the radio transmissions from the plane.
There was, in the view of the controller and in the view of our folks who listened to the tape, a considerable sense of urgency on the part of the pilot who was speaking to the controller.
But Miami Airport was still more than 20 miles away and time was running out. Down below, Chris Osceola was fishing.
Well, it started out when I first saw it, it was flying straight out like this. And then as it was turning back the other way, we were sitting like this, and it was coming like this.
Controllers got off a last radio message to the plane, telling them another airport, Opelika, was straight ahead, 15 miles away. But it was too late. The reply which came back from the crew was unintelligible.
It was all in a matter of seconds, because the plane just went like this to like that. And once it got on its side, it just went, about a 70, 75-degree angle straight into the ground.
Just 2 minutes from the first message of trouble, 109 lives had been lost in the water and muck of the Everglades. Robert Hager, NBC News, outside Miami.
As for that search, which has been going on now since late Saturday afternoon, it is hard to imagine more difficult circumstances. NBC's Kerry Sanders has that story tonight.
Families who lost loved ones, finding the bodies has become a top priority. Divers slogging their way through the Everglades made their first real progress today. Body parts are now in the morgue.
Right now we have roughly 40 body parts. Some of them are very small, some of them a little bit larger.
What's the largest body part you have?
The largest part would be, for example, a knee.
Cedric Keyes came from New Orleans to get as close as he could to the crash scene. His 38-year-old sister is dead.
This finalizes it for me.
Divers say the jet could not have crashed in a more difficult spot. The wreckage is 8 miles from the nearest road. Divers face snakes and alligators.
When one of the boats was going out, there was a sniper with an automatic weapon with periscope on it in case of alligators.
The water is only a few feet deep. It's what's just below the surface here that swallowed the victims and the plane. It's called Everglades muck. It's hundreds of years of decaying vegetation. Jesse Keenan is an Everglades guide. He says the muck won't naturally give up the bodies and wreckage it has entombed.
What you do is once you get down into it, it creates a suction. And that muck comes right up around your hand, just like this.
The dive teams suit up in protective gear because of the dangers from hundreds of gallons of toxic aviation fuel in the water. They can only stay in for 20 minutes at a time. At this rate, it could take months to finish. Kerry Sanders, NBC News, the Everglades.